Welcome to Pushing Forward with Alycia, a podcast that gives disability a voice. Each week, we will explore topics like confidence, ambition, resilience, and finding success against all odds. We are creating a collective community that believes that all things are possible for all people. Open hearts, clear paths, let's go. Welcome back to Pushing Forward with Alycia. I'm Alycia Anderson. We have an amazing artist on the show today. She is Los Angeles-based daydreamer and chaser of inspiration. She's an artist, a writer. Her name is Kam Redlawsk. She shares and illustrates moments of her life living with a rare and degenerative muscle wasting disorder, which is going to take her mobility away completely. I believe we're going to talk about that. She is a self-taught illustrator and an artist who primarily centers her work around the experience of living with disability and rare disease. She's an advocate. She has been a voice for rare disease and the disabled community for a very long time, I think over 15 years. And I saw some illustrations called Chair Devils. And I had never, ever seen any type of illustration like this in all of my life of living with a disability that I instantaneously started following you. And then here we are. Thank you so much, Kam, for gracing this podcast with your presence. It's my absolute pleasure and privilege to meet you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's really nice to meet you.
So let's look back a little bit if we can. Can you tell us a little bit of your backstory? Who are you? Where did you come from?
So I'm Kam, and I was actually born in Daegu, South Korea, which is the third largest city in South Korea. And I'm an adoptee. When I was born in the maternity clinic, I was abandoned at birth. I was subsequently sent to a convent actually for a couple of weeks while I think it was to wait to see if my biological mother was going to come back. In the meantime, they found me an orphanage to live in for about 4 years. And when I was about 4 years old, a Michigan family, a white family, who already had 3 boys, had sent to adopt me. And I flew from Korea to Chicago to meet my new parents at the airport. And they lived in Michigan, so we would drive from Chicago to Michigan. Yeah, I had a pretty typical upbringing. I had 3 brothers. I was really active in sports, and it was very different than Korea. But I think so much of my life has been shaped just from the origin of me not having a family to begin with. I think that has informed so much of my life and viewpoint right from the beginning of being different and knowing not everybody has the similar story, or knowing that a lot of people are alone. I think that's something that has really been very central to who I am. And always been this kind of like loneliness that I've felt from being an adoptee and an orphan. And I think that's really informed my way of interacting with the world and people, and how I care about people in terms of how they feel and empathetic, and do they feel lonely, and just the struggles and difficulties they feel in life. So I think that's something that's just always been naturally ingrained with me, is this just natural sense of being able to scope out people who felt similar to me, who felt alone and different.
Wow. What age were you diagnosed with how do you identify?
I sometimes call it a rare disease.
Rare disease, thank you. That is the term. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, so I got my official diagnosis when I was 23 in 2023. I was going to college, but really I had played soccer for about 13 years. It was like one of my favorite sports. And I grew up very much a tomboy. And then I noticed around 15, I was a freshman in high school soccer playing, and something was changing and different. And it pretty much happened throughout the entire time in high school as a soccer player. And then when I became a senior and I was a varsity soccer player, I had been cut from the team. And there was just this whole process of something happening with my body where I felt like every time I would try to kick, my body wouldn't follow through and listen. It was just becoming more of a problem. I was having what's called foot drop, where my ankle was dropping my foot. It was just too weak, where I was basically dragging my feet as I was walking. So I would express this to my parents and doctors and my family doctors, and nobody believed me. And then when I was about 19, I realized there was definitely something wrong. And I took my own initiative and became my own advocate. 6 diagnoses later, I was diagnosed with an extremely rare form of muscular dystrophy called GNE Myopathy, and it's genetic and it's progressive, and it has pretty much led to complete immobility, where my legs were affected first and I couldn't walk or stand, and then my arms began degrading as well. So now I can't raise my arms or move my hands or feed myself or things like that. So Yeah, it's pretty much started when I was 15 and I'm 45 now. So it's been a long journey.
Have you met anyone from your birth family that has the same condition?
No, that's a really good point because that's like my first time I really felt, wait a minute, there was like a tangible figure on my past biological parents I've never met, meaning like they passed this to me. They were carriers, both of them, but they didn't have the disease like me where it's expressed into a disability. They passed it on to me and mine expressed into a disability.
Wow. I think I know the advocacy work that you're doing with rare disease, chronic illness, all of that, it's become louder and louder and more prominent in the conversation, I think, than ever before. Your advocacy is incredible. You are a traveler, you're an artist, you are a writer.
Where it works
How
too. Yeah.
did your rare disease kind of inspire your illustrations and the work that you're doing today?
I've always been creative, but my training was in industrial design, which is more utilitarian. You're like you're sketching shoes or cars or sunglasses or wheelchairs or whatever it may be. But I've always had some kind of background in drawing. But how it happened was I came to California with no job, and I landed a job with Mattel toy company, and I started designing toys. And I had Googled my disease many times, but for some reason I did it again, and I just happened to find these two brothers who had the same condition as me, and they had started a nonprofit to spread awareness and start treatment development. So that's kind of really in 2006 how I accidentally fell into advocacy. So I created a branding campaign for this nonprofit and learning that the disease is mostly known in the Jewish Persian community. It's most common in that. And the second most common is Japanese genetic mutation, which is what I have. And it's how I realized I was part Japanese. In the process, I realized people don't respond to medical jargon or names of diseases, or we're inundated with it all the time. So, how do you get someone to really care? And that's when I started being more personal and I started a blog. I was the first person with my disease in the world to blog about my condition because it was still fairly new, and most people were not public or out because genetic diseases in many cultures are considered shameful. So a lot of people stay in hiding, like in Persian community or Asian community. And then I started a sketch. I just did a little doodle, and I realized, people, not everyone likes to read. Some people respond to things differently, especially something so complex as a disability or a disease, where it's something that people can't really understand. So I started drawing, and people started identifying and responding to my disability. So that's how I kind of merged who I really am, so I could really do what I care about in the way I care about, such as being creative, also continue advocating. So I think doing the art has really impacted the way it's different. Not a lot of advocates do art. And I'll share this one particular story that'll give a picture of how disabled people have responded to it. There's this one illustration I did called Monster and Me, which is now becoming a children's book. And I portrayed my disease or my disability as this really rare, as this really cute little forlorn monster who doesn't know why I don't want him with me. He just knows that he has to follow me. That's what he was designed for. And I had one of his followers reach out to me and say, you know what? When I saw your drawing, it made me realize that it's a relationship that I have with my condition. She says, I'm bipolar and I go to church and I don't even like to tell anyone in church because I'm so embarrassed or in fear of what people are going to think about me. And I've been suicidal and all sorts of things she was sharing with me. And she said, but your drawing made me realize, like, wait a minute, this is me. This condition is me. And it is a part of me and it's a relationship. So she started seeing her disability differently from then on. So that's just like the way I feel like being creative is just, it hits different people differently. And it's been very rewarding to be able to do something creative and have it mean something to someone else.
That is the most beautiful story. And that is so beautiful that you're illustrating a way for people to find a path forward to have a relationship with who they are. Did I read somewhere that you were not an illustrator initially at all? Is that true?
I'm self-taught.
That reminds me of Frida Kahlo, how she started becoming an artist with her disability and started painting on the bust of her cast. Is there any other visuals or examples or descriptions that you can give our listeners?
Yeah, so I think what guided the artistic path really was functional, meaning I wanted to connect with people And I wanted to do it in a different way than besides writing and an extension of myself, the creative. So I think that definitely influenced. And it kind of just it's taken a life of its own. I'd never expected to really do much with it, but all of my art, everything I draw is definitely directly inspired or related to my disability and my rare disease, and more so the emotional journey that one experiences with it, whether it's based on an accident where it's sudden, or you are a child and you've always had it, or whether you just suddenly become disabled and you have to learn how. So, in a lot of ways, for me, drawing this art, a lot of my art is surreal. And as I've gone through as a self taught illustrator, I've explored different styles. The style really depends on what I'm doing. Because I'm not like a trained illustrator, I'm not extremely good at character drawing where I can draw the same character in many views. So I find in all of my art, they're slightly different. There's never the same character. But all the characters are always me. It's always a girl, whether it's a little girl in like a children's book type of illustration or more of a surreal depiction with a woman. And I found even my own self, I've learned so much about disability just by seeing what comes out of it. And all of them are related to definitely visibility, which I think is so important. So I think a lot of the problems with ignorance is visibility. And so I really wanted to dedicate anything I do in creative world is related to giving some kind of visibility to a disabled person. So whether it's in my surreal art, where there's a wheelchair in the image, or whether it's chair devils, or whether it's Monster and Me, which is really about showing the disabled experience and the journey to acceptance to it. So yeah, it's really wonderful to be able to communicate something that can be difficult, but to express it through some brevity and some creativity, and hopefully it will reach different people in different ways. Not even if you're disabled, if you're just having like you have addiction, you have struggles, whatever it may be, we all have something that's following us.
And you're a very good storyteller. Your art does. It pulls you in into an emotion, and you're very talented. How has your rare disease, your position in life, your influence, your approach to design, was that all embedded together?
So I had my sophomore design class, I had chosen a wheelchair to redesign. And I noticed the utilitarian aspect approach to design whenever it was something related to a disabled person. So this was like back in 2002, right? This is when people were really talking about design and stuff. And all they could say was, you know what, disabled people like, and I haven't even met another disabled person by this time, but I said, you know what, I'm the same person I was before the disability. I like design, and so does all the disabled people. The typical thinking is that we don't like anything cool. We want to be just as cool as everyone else. So that was one of my major projects, was trying to pitch to a lot of companies that just planting the seed of the idea is like, you guys don't have to stop short of design when it comes to disabled or disabled products. I see design with so much more potential and innovation and more than a lot of people do that are not disabled. And just a very simple example that I always share is that when we look at an incline, for example, for a wheelchair, that typically is right next to like two or three little steps. They're like right next to each other on a sidewalk. I've seen this. And you see the segregation of design. Then you realize you don't actually need those two little steps at all. You just have an incline, and that serves everyone. You can create design that fits a lot of groups. You just have to think a little bit bigger. It's like my mind's eye is always looking at accessibility and ways to design things. That doesn't make it look like you designed it for a disabled person. You just designed it smarter, and thus it is able to fit a lot of people.
And
But
eliminate the segregation of design. So I'm not from the design world. I don't think I've ever heard that term. An inclusive or universal design is amazing. So you've been an advocate for over 15 years. What are some of the key projects that you've been involved with?
yeah, some of the key projects are like doing that complete branding campaign of that nonprofit. I ran a 5-year project called Bike for Kam, where my friends biked from San Francisco to LA, and we raised over $50,000 for research. And then last year I rode with them. We built a little plastic cart that could attach to the bike, and my friends biked me down through Big Sur, PCH, a couple other things. I've done a lot of art things where my art is covers the walls. It's mirror art in a rare disease medicine agency for treatments for rare diseases. They focus on disease treatments. And so they asked me, they used a lot of my art. I won a competition with, a lot of people don't know, it's called Power to the Patients, that a couple of years ago, there was a law passed where hospitals are supposed to list their prices now, but they still don't. So there was a whole awareness campaign with some celebrities and artists like Obey Giant, where they did an art campaign, and I did a art poster for them for that to raise awareness. So a lot of little things like that. Just I bounce around.
So you mentioned earlier too the children's book.
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit earlier when we were talking, but basically what happened was in 2012 I had fell, and my husband was working an hour away, so I had to wait on the floor an hour. I had gotten to the stage of the disease where I couldn't get myself up anymore after I fell. So I was laying there waiting an hour for my husband to come home to come pick me up. And I remember seeing this gray furry foot, and to me in my mind it was like that's the cause of all my physical woes and falling all the time was this gray monster that I suddenly drew. So I went and drew him, and it's taken years, but it's finally become something. But the idea was he represents my disability, my rare disease, GNE myopathy. And I really wanted to present him as this cute, forlorn, almost like puppy dog creature or monster. Of course, he represents disease and disability. So it's a fine balance of like, I want not people to view disability as a monster. He's just this cute thing that follows me. So how do we make this into a relationship? And this story, I think it's kind of timely in a lot of ways because I think the advocacy has been great for disability, but a lot of it is focused on purely on empowerment angle. And there's also this other side of disability life that I don't think is shared as much. And I think that's because people don't want to come off like weak and they don't want to show that, hey, you know what, disability can be difficult and it's difficult for everyone in different ways. But I really want to show there's this other side of advocacy that people who are newly disabled or have been disabled for years, decades, and still have not found the path to acceptance. We're not talking about like how do we also have our own path of acceptance with ourselves and with our condition and having empathy for ourselves and realizing, you know what, this is a journey and this is a new part of me, but it may not, I'm going to have struggles with it, but I want to accept myself to the level of I'm going to still live my life and realize I'm worthy and for equal access and all these things.
I love that. And you're right. A lot of the advocacy, and we're almost taught or it's embedded in us to hide the things that are hard, embarrassing, tough, make us look weak. This type of book is allowing us to have the representation. And I think that's really beautiful. So, wow.
Yeah, and in the end, it's really having empathy for yourself because I don't think we realize because we don't accept it. And acceptance doesn't mean just like disability pride. It doesn't mean that we're great with disability all the time. And I think sometimes that narrative is sold in the empowerment stage.
Wow. Oh, I can't wait to buy this book and for all of my nieces and nephews and one right by my bed. Oh my gosh, I cannot wait. Do you want to talk about the Chair Devils at all and how that started?
I'm doing this consultancy for a PBS children's show that does show a disabled character. So we started doing these little chibi-inspired, Japanese chibi-inspired characters, showing all the different flavors. You can be into sports, you can be a writer, you can be a teacher, you can be anything. You can be a mom, you can be a parent, you can be a podcaster, you can be an artist. And so it was just more of like a fun, lighthearted, and then we would choose some advocates and do their likeness as a Chair Devil chibi character. So eventually we would like to pitch it as a show, like a little TV show, but I just haven't had time.
That's pretty motivating. So, do we forget anything?
Just continuing. I really want to get into the creators. I'm a part of an installation with Ron Finley. He's an artist in LA at the Hammer Museum, but I really want to do installation art. I think there's a way to communicate disability with that. But yeah, just a lot of more creative venues. And I think that's the thing that keeps me going is if I didn't have my creativity and my projects and vision and looking forward to something, I think that's something that I always recommend to people who are struggling. I'm struggling all the time. I don't ever want anyone to know or think that I'm like okay with everything that's happening all the time. But I think what's important is what helped me is keep your eye on a project or something moving you forward. And that's been my saving grace. It's helped so much. There's been a lot of difficulties with this. And I think that's the thing that's always bringing me back is something that I can do. Just focus on what you can do and you'll find out that you'll be doing a lot.
I think that's pretty perfect. We always end with a pushing forward moment, some inspiration for our community. But I love that goal of having something in front of you, a goal, and keep aiming towards it to keep you motivated and inspired. Is there another one?
No, I think that's a very good one.
I think it was really good. I'm like, wow, she's hitting the pushing forward moment perfectly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Matches your title.
Kam, thank you so much for your time. It has been my honor to follow your beautiful work and your path, and you're teaching all of us as disabled people and beyond how to be pretty powerful. So thank you for just doing the work that you're doing. It's my pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and for everything that you're doing as well.
Thanks. We'll leave all of your amazing information so everybody can start to follow you, hire you for art, speaking, all of the things. And thank you to our community for showing up again this week. This has been Pushing Forward with Alycia. And that is how Kam and I roll on this podcast. We will see you next time.